Okay, I was asked about the Civil War and the Revolutionary War. What were my thoughts on it? So I will put out there what I see pretty clear. Of course, there are many lies that are so obvious that they're laughable. I mean, you will have to laugh when you really look at what's going on, what we've been told in 7th grade history class or whenever they put that on you. The Revolutionary War. Let's look at some of the numbers on it. They had 50,000 men. Okay? Keep in mind they're in bright red velvet jackets. Easy pickings in the woods, or coming right off the boats, to a population of 2.5 million of their enemies. Okay? We're talking like 1% there was their numbers. Against a population of people that even the children were lethal. Then they had to hunt, build, forage, keep warm. The women and children then were nothing to be messed with. And it wasn't just the Indians that had bows and arrows or rifles. It's not like these guys in the bright red velvet suits showed up with machine guns. So where did they come from? Well, they came from a boat trip that was a minimum of a month. 1 month on a boat. 100 to maybe 200 men. So you're talking about 500 big boats showing up, and they didn't show up all at once. And you couldn't just pull into port with your boat and hop off with 200 men in bright red jackets shooting at people. That wouldn't have lasted but a few minutes. Okay? Everyone had pistols, knives, axes, tomahawks, you name it. Okay? So let's say they were parking these big boats offshore, and they brought their little tiny boats in a few minutes at a time to take over 2.5 million people. Now that 50,000, that's not all at once, okay? That was throughout their entire 8-year battle. I think it was 8 years. And with their 4-foot long swords, they always make sure that's a big deal, right? Try to chase somebody down in a woods after you've already fired your rifle that has to be pack loaded, compressed, and not wet at all. Try to chase your enemy down in a woods, and there was woods everywhere back in. A squirrel could have hopped in a tree and not set his feet back down on the ground until he got into another state, okay? Nobody mowed the grass. There was brush, briars, trees everywhere. There were no roads, maybe a few beaten down wagon tracks, rivers, creeks, not to mention the elements, okay? Not to mention standing in a line with somebody beating a drum and everybody fire their guns all at once against 2.5 million people who also had guns, okay? It's not like they showed up with machine guns against the settlers here, okay? They had rifles, bows and arrows. Even a rock would have been dangerous in their hands back in. So yeah, it's completely absurd. Why would they do that? Because they have to brainwash that far back to get us to do Civil War for real now. Did anybody actually get hurt during that? Yeah. They had some people come over here. But the biggest part of it is what they're doing now. There are people here that are not people, okay? That's why you see them in Civil War pictures and they look like a movie star, or they look like this person or that person. They're here right now, and when actual Civil War happens, they just pop up and do their thing. That's hard for a lot of people to understand, but I'm telling you, they're here. The bloodline of Satan is here. You know, the numbers alone are just ridiculous. Well, and then we had what? The French also helped, I believe, right? And then they say, well, the Indians were helping the British at times. Are you kidding me? Think about that. You've got people here that were actually living off the land. You think they're going to be okay with... Now, they were okay with the people here for the most part. Most of that was lies too. The Cowboys and Indians thing. It's stupidity. You think the Indians were going to be okay with these bright red velvet coats and guys marching through at a 1% level against the humanity that was here? And only 13 colonies, okay? It wasn't the entire United States even. It didn't happen. Now, it didn't happen like they say. Did anybody get hurt? A few did, I'm sure. Because Grandpappy way back they still have one of his medals of honor, right? Where you have the cemeteries filled up with their gravestones. Well, try digging into those. I guarantee you there ain't very many people in them. Well, they couldn't find the bodies, so we put the stones. Yeah, right. They didn't have the tracking system that they do now. Very easy to manufacture a bunch of gravestones and say, okay, this is how many went. Here's the gravestones. Not to mention dragging around some big heavy cannons. And that's why they leave those cannons every once in a while everywhere, so everybody will still have that brainwashing in them. For the brain Washington, D.C. And that was already hard enough. You're marching around in a bright red velvet suit, and you're trying to take over 2.5 million people that are absolutely lethal people. Rough, rugged people. And now you're dragging a cannon. And you're trying to feed your horses as you go. Have you ever tried to feed a horse out in the wild? Good luck. Good luck with that. Especially an animal that's dragging anything heavy. And I forget how many thousands and thousands of cannons they said they drug through here. Where are they at? Well, they're at the parks. They just happen to end up at parks. And not very many. There's not, what was it, like 20,000 cannons? Are you kidding me? Those things don't rust away. You should be able to go in your backyard every once in a while and somebody be digging into a cannon, okay? It's all been a fairy tale to get us to where we're at now. Now, as far as the Civil War, I may check the numbers on it, but I think that lasted 4 years, right? And can you imagine? I mean, people were very tight-knit back then. Just because there was an imaginary state line did not induce the factor of somebody coming along and saying, fight your cousin Bob to the death here, when you can literally go out your back door and shake his hand. They were tight-knit. They were real families back then. Well, it was about slavery. No, it was told to us that it was about slavery. Slavery was they say it was the colored people in chains, and they were, but so were everyone else. That's how the rich people did us back then, and that's how they still do us now, except for those chains are bigger and larger now, and they're invisible. Well, my great-great-grandpappy, we still have, his old gun, and he really went. Yes. A little bit of action happened. Not like they tell us. You're not going to get cousins and brothers and sisters to turn against each other because they live in your backyard and there's an imaginary line there. Not going to happen. Well, what did happen is the bloodline here, and back then this was very prominent. The people in there usually were of the bloodline of Satan, and they pop up in large numbers and massacre people. And that's what's coming here, okay? They're here. They are here. Same ones that fought in the Civil War, the same ones that are here now that will pop up, along with some real dummies that'll fall in place. The Civil War, both sides were massacred by Satan's bloodline. And you had a few dummies out there that would fight their neighbor in the Carolinas versus Kentucky. Okay? That's just how it went down. The numbers are not there. You can't have what they say happened. That was how far back the brainwashing has been to get us into what they need, a real civil war now, because when they say we're overpopulated, we're not, but we're overpopulated for them. There's too many of us now. If we was all to wake up at the same time, it would be like they're one person against 100,000. It's that bad, okay? They need us to self-destruct. The problem is they can actually pull civil war off now. They'll have their satanic bloodline pop up to initiate it. But you have enough people brainwashed and stupid now from Civil War movies and Revolutionary War and whatever. And they're ready to fight for America, the United States of America, because of the Orange Baboon and the dividing that they have caused in every level of life. Now, if he tells people to go to war against the Democrat versus the Republican, that will happen now, because the average person that voted Republican loves the Bible and fell for things like Trump saying, well, I was asked if I was the most famous person in the world that I am. He said, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Jesus Christ is. Well, that's enough right there to get the brainwashed on board. Not all of them, but most. And then you have the money factor. People love money. Even though they're not seeing any changes, they think that it's changing and will eventually get to them. What's going to eventually get to them is their demise. Satan's bloodline is going to pop up here, and they are here everywhere, okay? They really are. But they do need us to thin down the herd within ourselves. None of these numbers work, you understand? None of it. Or the colors of the red velvet suits standing in a line, 200 men shooting their guns all at the same time at people that would have been like, okay, stand behind a tree and get them afterwards. 50,000 men taking on 2.5 million. Even if you throw the Indians in there, and that was just really out there. We're living a lie, folks. It's been a lie the whole time. But unfortunately, Civil War is really coming now because, genetically, these lies are passed down. Your blood has memory. Your water has memory. That's what we're made out of. And people that are brainwashable, that sticks with them, and it keeps going and keeps building upon itself. So if you brainwash people back in the early 1800s, late 1700s, that continues on. Not only does it continue on just that original thought process, it has compounded. So you'll have real nut jobs walking around pretty soon to defend something that they don't even have.